Good morning, college prep scholars. If you are working from home, please get a piece of paper, label it with today's date, and the title conclusions questions at the top of your paper. You'll use it to take notes, and then if you're working from home, you can upload a picture of your notes to the assignment. So here is our agenda. We'll have a leader in class review the charts question from the quiz. We'll have brief notes on conclusions questions. In class, scholars will study an example in teams from the Princeton Review book, and if time, one team will present for a project grade. And then you will have a Waygrounds quiz, or a Waygrounds test, that has a few objective questions, and then you will have 2 spoken responses. So I want to start stretching your stamina. Instead of doing just one question, talking me through the entire discussion of how to apply the Princeton approach to that question, you're going to do 2, a charts question and a conclusions question. If you're working from home, you'll have access to the Waygrounds quiz, and I will post screenshots of the questions in the assignment in Schoology, and you will need to enable your microphone in order to complete the test. Let's review. This is always important. How many sections are there on the SAT, and what are they? If you said 2, you would be correct. Reading, writing, and math with a break between them, a 10-minute break between. Within each section, how many modules are there and why? So within each section, there are 2 modules. They look exactly the same. They have exactly the same kinds of questions in them. The first module is going to diagnose how well you're doing. The second module will be either easier or harder, depending on how you did on the first one. There is no break between them. The test will slide you straight from one module into the next. How many questions are on each reading writing module? If you said 27, you would be correct. The module is 33 minutes, which means that the whole section is a little over an hour. And it also means that you have about 1 minute per question. 1 minute is probably not enough to answer many of these questions, so that means you're going to have to pick and choose. You use your POOD, your personal order of difficulty, to decide which questions to attack first. You attack the questions you're best at. Save the other ones for later. Always make sure that you guess on every question. Don't leave any question unanswered. Okay, and finally, within the reading writing module, how many sections are there according to Princeton? If you said 3, you would be correct. There is the reading questions section, that's the first half of the module, the rules questions, and the rhetoric questions. And they are always in that same order. So you can jump around in the test to find the questions you want to do first. And the reading questions section breaks down into how many types. If you said 8, you would be correct, and we have covered roughly 6 of those. We are covering the last 2 this week. Then we will move on to rules and rhetoric. Okay, so grab your pencil, get ready to take notes. We are going to take notes on conclusions questions today. So, what is a conclusion on the SAT? A conclusion is a summary sentence that follows from and restates ideas and information in a passage. So it's kind of like when you write a paragraph on the Axes model or any other model that your teacher has given you in English class. You always end that paragraph with a sentence that restates the contents of the paragraph and sort of sums it up, sort of wraps it up. So you can think of a conclusion as kind of like the gift wrapping on a present. It wraps up the basic information that can be drawn out of that paragraph. So that's one way to think about what a conclusion is for the purposes of the SAT. And here is Princeton's basic approach. It's a little bit different from all of the other kinds of questions we studied, so please do take notes. Okay, so first, as always, read the question first. Then identify the question type. So for conclusions questions, look for this phrase, which choice most logically completes the text. According to the Princeton authors, conclusions questions always have this kind of phrase in them. They might switch up their language a little bit for the 2026 SAT, but according to Princeton, it is this kind of phrase. Which choice most logically completes the text? And you'll see a blank space there at the end of the paragraph. Okay, let's just review why we identify the question type. So we've seen 8 types of questions so far. We're going to see more question types with rules and rhetoric. The purpose of identifying the question type is so you can adjust your approach accordingly. Different kinds of questions require a different approach. If you know going into the question what your approach is going to be, you're going to be able to solve that question more effectively and more quickly. So you're going to be just like a quarterback at the line of scrimmage, reading the defense. And the quarterback is going to change up that play depending on what the defense of the opposite team is doing. So if the defense is showing blitz, the quarterback is probably going to change it up and not to try to do a long pass play down the field, maybe just a short pass or run the football. So you're always looking at the defense. You're always looking at the SAT and what question type you're dealing with, and you're adjusting your approach accordingly so that you can beat that question. Okay, so here's the basic approach for conclusions questions. After you identify the question type, as you read the passage, pay attention to the main topic. What is the main thing that this paragraph is about? It is usually in the first sentence or two. Highlight 2 or 3 statements made about the topic. So your conclusion is going to pull together information and ideas from the paragraph. You may have a lot of highlighting. Look in particular for transition words to help you zero in on the key ideas. Words such as however, but, yet, and therefore. And then annotate. Once you find all the relevant points, 2 or 3 of them, combine them into one idea and write it down. Then, as always, use POE. Knock out answers that don't match your annotation and highlighting. If you get stuck, one kind of trap answer to look for or to watch out for is beyond the text. If the answer jumps to conclusions that are not in the passage. So in class, here's what we're going to do. Apply the approach to question 14 from your practice module on the next slide. Teams will be marking up their test. I think I'm just going to have them do it together. Actually, no, we're going to walk through this together in class. So let me go ahead and find my photos and we can take a look at that together if you are working from home. I believe this is a question. So this was actually from the practice test we took at the beginning of the semester. Let's just go ahead and go through it together. Find my highlighting tool. Okay. So it helps me when I'm reading just to highlight stuff. That doesn't mean you should do it on your test. But again, what are we going to look at first? Read the question first. So, which choice most logically completes the text, excuse me. So you're taking the SAT and you see this type of question, logically completes the text, and you see this little blank here. You know this is a conclusions question. So what it's asking you to do is pull information out of the paragraph and kind of sum it up in just one sentence. So that's our question. Let's go ahead and take a look at the passage itself. We're going to read the passage, try to figure out the main topic of the passage, and then highlight the most relevant points about it. Okay. Although postage for letters in the early United States was expensive, okay, postage for letters looks like an important topic. Let's highlight it. Was expensive and therefore largely limited to the wealthy. Politicians such as James Madison. Okay, I'm also going to highlight although, because that's a transition word that shows contrast. Although postage for letters was expensive and largely limited to the wealthy. But politicians such as James Madison believed that money raised by the postal system could be used to benefit the nation as a whole. So benefiting everybody. Madison proposed that a possible application of these funds toward the purpose of benefiting young Americans was the establishment of a newspaper for the general public, which would therefore Okay, Princeton recommends that we pause here and annotate and try to figure out overall what is the main topic of this paragraph and what's being said about it, and to combine all these things together. So, postage was expensive. Postage cost a lot of money, but Madison thought that the revenue could be used to create a newspaper for everyone, not just for rich people. So we've got wealthy up here contrasted with, well, young Americans. Young Americans look important, and newspaper for all. So postage for letters is probably the main topic, but the newspaper is a topic as well. Okay, so we've got highlighting and we've got some annotations. The next step, of course, is POE. We are going to read each answer choice and see whether we can eliminate it if it does not agree with our highlighting and annotations. Okay. All right. Let's see. The establishment of a newspaper for the general public, which would therefore decrease the cost of postage. No, it's not about decreasing the cost of postage. It didn't say anything about that. It only talked about establishing a newspaper. Providing news and information to everyone, especially those in lower classes. That one looks like a possibility. We're going to leave it open. Transform the common relationship between wealth and the privilege of postage use. No idea what that means. Encourage members of lower classes considering a post office job. No, it didn't say anything about post office jobs. Okay. So B is really pretty much the only answer choice that does not disagree with our annotating. That is the most sensible conclusion. And I believe that is the answer that Princeton tells us is the correct one. Okay. So this is our work on conclusions questions. In class, we're going to be taking a look at another question from the Princeton book, which you can also see in the following slides and should analyze for yourself if you are working from home. Otherwise, you need to, once you have your notes and you've practiced on the next practice question for yourself, go into the Wade-Grounds test. There's a few objective questions. Then you're going to do 2 spoken responses on 2 new questions, a charts question and a conclusions question. I will post photos of those in the Schoology assignment so that you can see them. You can maybe screenshot them with your phone, and that way you can read them from your phone while you are doing the audio response in the Wade-Grounds test. And of course, contact me with any and all questions or concerns. Thank you.